They say that in 1924, a man in a small Pennsylvania town invented a way to record human whispers into the molecular structure of glass. They called it the soul's phonograph. Then the factory burned, the inventor vanished, and the world forgot. 70 years later, Elias Thorne found a translucent blue marble in his grandfather's attic, and when he held it to the light, he didn't see his reflection. He heard his mother's voice crying for help 30 years before he was born.
Elias Thorne lived in a world of silence, which was ironic for a man who made his living restoring antique clocks. He liked the mechanical certainty of gears. They didn't lie, they didn't leave, and they certainly didn't have secrets. His workshop in Alexandria, Virginia, smelled of cedar shavings and machine oil. Outside, the humid summer of 1996 pressed against the windows. Elias was 32, a man who looked like he was constantly searching for a lost set of keys. His life was a quiet loop until the telegram arrived, an anachronism in a digital age, informing him that his grandfather, Silas, had passed away in the rugged hills of Clarion County, Pennsylvania. Silas Thorne had been a ghost long before he died, a former glassblower for the defunct Lumina Glassworks. He had cut ties with the family in the 1960s. He left behind only a reputation for madness and a locked Victorian house perched on the edge of a collapsing quarry. When Elias arrived at the estate, the air felt heavy, as if the oxygen itself was saturated with the dust of a century. The house was a skeletal remain of Gilded Age ambition. Inside, the floorboards groaned under his boots like a dying cello. In the attic, buried beneath moth-eaten quilts and crates of discarded ledgers, Elias found the specimen box. It wasn't filled with butterflies or stones. It was filled with glass spheres, hundreds of them, ranging from the size of a pea to a grapefruit. Some were obsidian black, others were a haunting, iridescent violet. He picked up a small cerulean marble. As the sunlight from the attic window pierced the glass, a vibration hummed through his palm. It wasn't mechanical. It felt like a heartbeat. Elias brought the blue marble back to his workshop. He was a man of science, but the object defied the laws of physics he knew. Under a microscope, the interior of the glass wasn't solid. It looked like a frozen storm of microscopic crystalline structures, fractals that moved when exposed to sound. He remembered the rumors his father used to whisper, that Silas wasn't just a glassblower, but a soundsmith. In the late 19th century, the U.S. was obsessed with the occult and the technological. Men like Tesla and Edison were the wizards of the era. The story went that a rogue group of engineers at Lumina Glassworks had discovered a resonant frequency in a specific vein of silica found only in the Appalachian Mountains. They believed that if you blew the glass while certain frequencies were played, the glass would trap the vibration forever. Elias spent 3 days building a makeshift resonator.
He placed the blue marble in a velvet-lined cradle and began to sweep through radio frequencies. At 432 hertz, the marble began to glow. A static-filled hiss filled the room, followed by the sharp intake of a breath. Then a woman's voice, clear, melodic, and trembling with a familiar grief. "Silas, if you're hearing this, the fire wasn't an accident. They're coming for the blueprints. Hide the boy. Hide Elias." Elias dropped his soldering iron. The voice belonged to his mother, Sarah. But Sarah had died in a car accident when Elias was 4. In this recording, she sounded terrified, and she was speaking to a man who had supposedly been estranged from her for years. More importantly, the date etched into the base of the glass sphere was October 12th, 1968, 2 days before she died.
Chapter 3. The Ghost in the Machine. The discovery shattered Elias's understanding of his own history. He began to realize that his grandfather hadn't been a madman, he had been a guardian. He returned to Pennsylvania, this time armed with questions. He sought out the oldest living resident of the town, a woman named Hattie who had worked the sorting lines at Lumina. "You have the Thorn eyes," Hattie whispered, her kitchen smelling of boiled cabbage and old newspapers. "Your grandfather didn't just make jars and windows, boy. He made echo glass. During the Cold War, the government wanted it. Think about it, a storage medium that never degrades, that can't be hacked by magnets, that holds the very essence of a moment." Hattie explained the Lumina protocol. The glass didn't just record sound, it recorded the emotional state of the speaker. It was a bridge between physics and consciousness. The fire in '68 wasn't a malfunction, it was a purge. The Department of Defense realized that if you could record a human soul into glass, you could also play it back into someone else. They wanted to use it for re-education. Elias realized his mother wasn't just a victim of a car crash. She was a scientist who had tried to smuggle the master sphere, the key to the entire process, out of the facility. Chapter 4. The Shadow of the Agency. As Elias delved deeper into the dusty archives of the local library, he noticed he wasn't alone. A black sedan with federal plates began appearing at the end of the driveway of the Thorn estate. A man named Agent Miller approached him. Miller didn't look like a villain. He looked like a tired bureaucrat. "Mr. Thorn, you're in possession of property that belongs to the United States government," Miller said, standing on the porch. "The acoustic crystalline storage project was classified in 1970. We let your grandfather keep the house out of respect for his service, but now that he's gone, the inventory must be returned." "It's not property," Elias snapped. "It's my mother's voice." "It's a weaponized psychological tool, Elias. If that glass is played at the wrong frequency, it doesn't just play a memory, it overwrites the listener's mind with the trauma of the speaker. Why do you think your grandfather went mad? He spent 40 years listening to the screams of the people he helped record." Miller gave him 48 hours to hand over the specimen box. Elias knew he couldn't. He had found another sphere, this one a deep, pulsing red. On it was written a single name,
Elias. Chapter 5. The Red Sphere. Elias locked himself in the basement of the old house. He bypassed the federal surveillance by using a hand-cranked generator and an old gramophone horn he'd modified. He placed the red sphere, his sphere, into the device. As the vibration started, the room didn't just fill with sound, it filled with feeling. He felt a wave of overwhelming warmth, the smell of lavender, and the sensation of a small hand being held by a larger, calloused one. It was a sensory upload. He saw a memory through his grandfather's eyes. He saw himself as a toddler playing in the garden. He saw his mother, Sarah, handing a silver briefcase to Silas. The formula is in his DNA, Silas. The glass reacts to him. He is the only one who can tune the master sphere. Keep him away from the machines. Let him learn the value of time so he doesn't waste it on the past. Elias wept. His entire career, his obsession with clocks and gears, had been a subconscious directive planted by his mother to keep him grounded in the present, to protect him from the echo glass that had destroyed his family. But then the memory shifted. The red sphere began to vibrate violently. A dark figure entered the garden. It was a younger version of Agent Miller. The accident wasn't an accident. It was a botched retrieval.
Chapter 6. The Submerged Secret. The red sphere had revealed more than just a memory. It had provided a map. Not a map of paper and ink, but one of sound. Elias realized that the hum he heard near the old quarry wasn't the wind, it was a beacon. He packed his grandfather's old diving gear, brass and heavy canvas, and a portable resonator he'd built using parts from his clocks. He knew the black sedans were watching, so he used the old tunnels used by the glassworks miners to reach the Allegheny River under the cover of a moonless night. The water was ice cold and tasted of iron. As he descended into the flooded lower levels of the Lumina Foundation, his flashlight cut through the murk to reveal a vault door made not of steel, but of thick, leaded glass. Inside the vault, protected by an air pocket that shouldn't have existed, sat the master sphere. It was the size of a human head, perfectly clear, yet it seemed to swallow all light. When Elias touched it, the silence in his head, the silence he had lived with since his mother died, shattered. He didn't just hear her, he felt her consciousness. The master sphere was a biological hard drive, and it was currently downloading the final moments of the Lumina project into his mind. Chapter 7. The Philadelphia Frequency. The download was a sensory overload. Elias saw the year 1943. He saw the U.S. Navy experimenting with the master sphere in Philadelphia. They weren't trying to make ships invisible. They were trying to make soldiers incorruptible by recording the ideal soldier's psyche and playing it back into the minds of recruits. But the human brain couldn't handle the purity of the signal. The Philadelphia experiment didn't end in teleportation. It ended in mass psychological collapse. Elias's grandfather, Silas, had been the lead engineer who shut it down. He had stolen the master sphere to prevent the government from trying again during the Vietnam War.
"You were never supposed to find this, Elias," a voice boomed through the vault speakers. Elias turned to see Agent Miller standing on a catwalk above the water level. He wasn't alone. He had a team of technicians with him, carrying harmonic disruptors, devices designed to shatter glass from a distance. "The world is chaotic, Elias," Miller said, his voice echoing. "Imagine a world where we can broadcast the feeling of peace, where we can overwrite the anger of a rioter or the hatred of an enemy. The Master Sphere isn't a weapon, it's a cure for human nature." "It's a lie," Elias shouted back, clutching the heavy sphere to his chest. "If you take away the choice to feel pain, you take away the choice to be human. My mother died for this. She wasn't protecting a secret, she was protecting us from becoming ghosts in your machine." Miller signaled his men. The disruptors began to hum. The glass vault started to spiderweb. Elias realized he couldn't win a physical fight. He looked at the Master Sphere. It reacted to his heart rate. He remembered the red sphere's message. The formula is in his DNA. He didn't run. Instead, he began to sing. It was a low, guttural lullaby his mother used to hum. The Master Sphere began to pulse in sync with his voice, creating a counter-frequency that neutralized the disruptors. The vibration became so intense that the technician's equipment exploded in a shower of sparks. In the chaos, Elias dived back into the water, the Master Sphere tucked under his arm like a precious child. Chapter 9. The Ghost Highway. Elias was now a fugitive. He was driving a rusted 1970 Chevy Nova, his grandfather's car, heading west towards the only place he felt safe, the desert. The Master Sphere sat in the passenger seat, buckled in. It was talking to him, not in words, but in flashes of Americana, forgotten songs from the 1920s, the smell of rain on hot Kansas asphalt, the collective dreams of a nation. He realized the sphere had been recording everything for a century. It was a living record of the American soul. As he crossed the border into Ohio, the car's radio began to act up. It wasn't picking up stations, it was broadcasting the sphere's contents. People in the cars passing him began to pull over, looks of confusion, and then profound peace washing over their faces. For a 5-mile radius around Elias, every person was experiencing a shared memory of a simpler, kinder time. But the government's reach was long. They didn't just have cars, they had satellites, and they had discovered that Elias's own brain was now acting as an antenna.
Chapter 10. The Glass Cathedral. Elias reached a derelict observatory in the mountains of West Virginia, a place called the Quiet Zone, where radio transmissions are restricted by law. It was the only place he could think clearly. Inside the observatory, he met a man he thought was dead, his father, Thomas. Thomas Thorne hadn't died in the car crash with Sarah. He had been recorded into a prototype glass chamber, his physical body kept in a vegetative state by the agency while they harvested his mind. "Elias,"
the figure in the glass chamber whispered through a speaker system. "You have to finish it. You have to shatter the network." Thomas explained that the agency had built a series of towers across the U.S. disguised as cell phone masts. They were ready to use the master sphere's frequency to broadcast a compliance signal nationwide. "They need the master sphere to act as the heart of the system," Thomas said. "But if you play the shatter frequency, the sound of a heart breaking, the glass will resonate until every tower in the country turns to sand." Chapter 11. The Anatomy of a Heartbreak. To find the shatter frequency, Elias had to do the one thing he had spent his life avoiding. He had to fully relive the memory of his mother's death. He connected himself to the master sphere using the observatory's high-powered amplifiers. The world turned white. He was 4 years old again. He was in the back seat. He saw the headlights of the agency's truck. He heard the screech of tires. He felt his mother's hand reach back to cover his eyes. "I love you, Elias. Don't look back. Just keep moving." The grief was a physical weight, a crushing pressure in his chest. It was the purest, most agonizing sound in the universe. Elias began to scream, and as he did, the master sphere turned from clear to a deep, bloody crimson. The glass of the observatory windows began to vibrate. Birds fell from the sky, stunned by the sheer emotional force of the sound. Chapter 12. The Midnight Broadcast. Outside, the agency's helicopters surrounded the peak. Miller was on a megaphone pleading with Elias to stop. "You'll kill yourself, Elias. The human body can't contain that much resonance." Elias didn't care. He was no longer just a clockmaker. He was the conductor of a symphony of truth. He patched the master sphere into the observatory's main transmitter, a dish aimed at the ionosphere. "This isn't for you, Miller," he whispered. "This is for everyone who ever lost someone they weren't allowed to mourn." He hit the send button. A wave of pure, unadulterated emotion rippled out from West Virginia. It hit the first tower in Pittsburgh, and the steel structure groaned as the glass components within it disintegrated. It hit D.C., New York, and Chicago. For 1 minute, every person in America felt the exact same thing: the weight of their own history, the beauty of their own pain, and the absolute necessity of being free. Chapter 13. The Silence of the Sand. The aftermath of the broadcast was not a roar, but a deafening silence. Across the United States, millions of electronic devices had glitched, but more importantly, the hidden compliance towers had literally turned to dust. In major cities, people stood in the streets, weeping openly. They weren't sad. They were feeling for the first time in years, stripped of the artificial numbing the agency had broadcasted for decades. At the observatory, Elias collapsed. The master sphere was now cool to the touch. Its crimson hue faded to a soft, pulsing amber. Agent Miller didn't storm the building. He walked in alone, his suit covered in the dust of the shattered windows. He looked at the vegetative body of Thomas Thorne, then at Elias. "You've done it," Miller said. his voice stripped of his authority. "You've broken the spell, but you've also left us vulnerable. A nation that feels everything is a nation that can't be governed." "Good," Elias rasped, his throat raw from the shatter frequency. "Maybe it's time we tried being people instead of subjects." Chapter 14. The Transmigration Protocol. Elias knew he didn't have much time. The master sphere was dying. The shatter frequency had cracked its internal crystalline lattice. If the sphere went dark, his father's consciousness, the ghost in the machine, would vanish forever. "I need to get him out," Elias told Miller. "It's impossible," Miller replied. "The tech to reverse the process was destroyed in the '68 fire. Your grandfather was the only one who knew how to reflesh a recording." But Elias remembered the clocks. His grandfather hadn't just taught him about gears. He had taught him about escapements, the part of a clock that releases energy in a controlled way. He realized that his father wasn't stuck in the glass. He was being stored there. To get him out, he needed a vessel, not a biological one. That would take years to grow, but a harmonic one.
Chapter 15. The Glass Bridge. Elias used the last of his grandfather's secret supplies, a rare batch of lumina-infused mercury and a massive hollow glass pendulum. He stayed awake for 72 hours, fueled by caffeine and the desperate hope of a sun. He built a bridge. He wasn't just repairing a clock. He was building a doorway between the digital crystalline world and the physical one. He connected his father's life support sensors to the pendulum. The idea was simple but terrifying. Use the master sphere to swing his father's consciousness into the mercury, which would act as a fluid conductor back into Thomas's own dormant brain. "If the frequency is off by even 1 hertz," Miller warned, watching from the shadows, "you'll fry his nervous system. He won't just die, he'll be erased." "I know the frequency," Elias said, looking at the amber sphere. "It's the sound of a heartbeat when you're holding someone you love." Chapter 16. The Return. The transfer began at midnight. The observatory hummed with a low, deep bass that vibrated the very stones of the mountain. The mercury in the pendulum began to glow, swirling in patterns that mimicked the human neural network. Inside the sphere, Thomas Thorne's echo fought against the pull. For 30 years, he had been a god in a glass world, omnipotent, timeless, but lonely. Coming back meant returning to a broken, aging body. "Dad, follow my voice," Elias whispered into the resonator. In the final moments, the master sphere shattered into 1,000,000 diamond-like shards. The mercury surged into the electrodes attached to Thomas's temples. The heart monitor flatlined. Elias threw the equipment aside, rushing to his father's side. "Dad, breathe!" Seconds passed, then a ragged, wet gasp. Thomas Thorne's eyes, milky with age but sharp with recognition, fluttered open. He looked at Elias, then at his own trembling hands. "The time," Thomas whispered. "What time is it, Elias?" "It's now, Dad. It's finally just now."
Chapter 17. The Legacy of Lumina. The agency was dismantled in the months that followed. The shatter frequency had exposed too many secrets, and the American public, now emotionally awake, demanded accountability. Elias and Thomas moved back to the old house in Pennsylvania. They didn't rebuild the glassworks. Instead, they turned the quarry into a sanctuary. Elias realized that while the echo glass was gone, the lesson remained. Humans weren't meant to store their memories in cold, hard objects. We were meant to carry them in our hearts, to let them fade and change, to let them make us who we are. One evening, while cleaning out the basement, Elias found one last tiny marble. It was clear, no color, no recording. He walked to the edge of the river and held it up. He didn't hear a voice. He didn't see a memory. He just saw the sunset distorted and beautiful through the lens of the glass. He threw the marble into the river. He didn't need to record the moment. He was finally living it. Chapter 18. Epilogue. The Hum in the Wind. Years later, hikers in the Appalachian Mountains still claim that on certain humid nights, when the wind blows through the old quarry, they can hear a faint melodic hum. Some say it's just the wind in the stones. Others say it's the earth itself, remembering the time a man taught the world to feel again. Elias Thorne died an old man, surrounded not by machines or glass, but by family. And in his final moments, he didn't reach for a recording. He just closed his eyes and listened to the steady ticking rhythm of a clock on the wall, a sound that didn't trap time, but celebrated it.